I've often come across the statement that the majority of white South Africans are in denial about our contribution to apartheid. Accusations that we want to distance ourselves from the ugly past and pretend it had nothing to do with us, or that we have not expressed remorse for our actions and behavior during this period. Today, the majority of whites believe that apartheid was wrong. We most certainly are not in denial that it was wrong, and those who were old enough and knew it was wrong do not pretend that we had nothing to do with it. This idea that the whites are in denial is a clever political maneuvering the anti-white politicians and the top brass have been playing since they were elected into government. The government wants its supporters to believe that the whites are in denial, thus using this negative concept as a tool to alienate the whites while increasing its support base using this propaganda. They want the whites to be seen as unrepentful, people who do not want to accept change, people who prefer to go back to the days of black, coloured and Indian oppression. Something very interesting that most people don't realise is that the ANC in fact do not want the whites to apologise or express remorse, because if the whites did this on a grand scale, the ANC would no longer be able to use the unrepentful white as a political mechanism to confuse its supporters with. It knows as long as it continues using negative associations against South Africa's white citizens, the ANC supporters feel justified in backing affirmative action, black economic empowerment, quota systems for sport and business, name changes to cities, towns, streets and rivers, just to mention a few. The ANC are hindering the social development of our country, using whites as ammunition, not to protect the supporters, but to elevate and cement their own political status. The majority of South Africa's black citizens are very forgiving people, but the ANC continues to highlight issues of the past, almost hindering unification of all South Africans. In no way whatsoever have any of the ANC policies brought the races closer together. In fact, the ANC policies have had and continue to have the opposite effect. One of the ministers said that affirmative action is here to stay, with the sole purpose of stirring up racial division. Perhaps he and the ANC politicians should study Nelson Mandela's inauguration speech and use this as a guideline to see just how off track they really are towards positive development and unifying South Africa as one people in one nation. Many ANC politicians have extreme resentment towards whites, and they're enjoying the roles being reversed while sitting on their political throne. They now know what it feels like to be a racist government, and we the whites now know what it's like to be the victims of racism and discrimination. The ANC and high individuals within the trade unions want to punish the whites, which they're doing under the camouflage of their democratic armour. This armour they label the law. Unlike Zimbabwe's ZANU-PF party, the ANC do not have any immediate threat to its governing position. Political oppositions continue to fragment and divide, and slowly but surely the symptoms of a one-party state become apparent as a result of this vacuum. Because the ANC does not have any political threat, it does not have to convince the electorates on new laws or new policies before implementing them. The government, the country is now nothing but a chore to the ANC. The only real goal that is worth any satisfaction is the alienation of South Africa's white citizens. The voice of the white man needs to be silenced. A white member of Parliament was ordered out of Parliament because he dared question the then Minister of Health about her past on matters which directly affect her capability of fulfilling her role as a public servant. Today the only threat to the ANC is a split within the party, or COSATU and the South African Communist Party breaking away from the ANC. As is happening in Zimbabwe, South Africa's Liberation Party will eventually start to lose its support base. Not like Zimbabwe, where a madman is totally responsible for its country's collapse, but rather because of the corruption within the government from top to bottom. The ANC will eventually be its own worst enemy. We have all heard of the crime statistics, i.e. armed robbery, burglary, adult and child rape, carjackings, the corruption within the police force. We've all heard about the 5.5 million AIDS victims, of whom the majority have been neglected, other than being advised to eat potatoes and stick to a good diet. There are so many corrupt officials that if you had to use all the lawyers, all the solicitors, all the advocates, it would take you half a century to convict them all. But let's not forget what this report is about. This is not one of the many articles you read, news clips you watch about South Africa's crime and inefficiency of the government, but rather a report to highlight the ANC's hidden agenda for South Africa's white citizens and why this agenda is necessary for the ANC. It is using easily implementable legislation such as affirmative action, black economic empowerment, changing the names of historical locations that have no connection with apartheid, and the quota system in sport to mask its failure in running the country efficiently, and in doing so offering non-whites a false sense of security that it is a government here to serve the people. It is also an article to highlight that certain ANC politicians have a grudge on whites because of the past, because of apartheid, and they are abusing their political status to take it out on the whites. I never thought our rainbow nation with two colors, black and white. This article has not been compiled to give the impression that South Africa has no prosperous future and is doomed to failure. But it also does not paint a pretty picture for South Africa's whites. What is next on the ANC agenda? What new legislation awaits us? Is it the name change of the country, or even the compulsory confiscation of farms? One thing that is certain, as long as the ANC continues to run the country in such a way, the white man will feel the repercussions of it. Thank you very much.